On Christmas Eve, Alex brought a pregnant college student home. When he broke the news to me, I was in the kitchen making handmade ravioli. The filling tender veal and wild porcini mushrooms was a favorite of my mother-in-law, Eleanor Wentworth. Flour stuck to my fingers, and I had to rub it off with effort. With my head down, I focused on pinching the dough. Exactly 18 precise crimps on every single ravioli. This was an unbreakable rule in the Wentworth household for the holidays. Every crimp had to be perfect and symmetrical, as if stamped by a machine. In 6 years of marriage, I hadn't acquired many special talents, but when it came to making ravioli, I could easily compete in a national championship. Outside the window, a few early fireworks and Christmas light displays illuminated the sky, blooming like tiny sparks against the not-quite-dark horizon. Our housekeeper, Helen, was setting the table in the dining room. Water boiled in a large pot, the steam coating the kitchen windows in a thick white haze. Everything looked exactly as a Christmas Eve should, except for the young woman standing in our foyer. She wore a white puffer jacket, and a scarf covered half her face, leaving only her huge, round eyes with long lashes visible. Eyes like that, even without makeup, radiate a childlike innocence. Her stomach was already noticeably round. The winter coat couldn't hide it. She looked to be about 4 or 5 months along. She shrank timidly behind Alex, her fingers clutching the lapel of his navy blue cashmere overcoat, like a first grader whose teacher had brought her into the wrong classroom. Alex stood under the warm glow of the entryway chandelier. His expression was complex. I could read guilt, nervousness, and a strange, unprecedented resolve I had never seen in him before. I had only seen that kind of resolve on his face once, 6 years ago at our wedding, when he stood at the altar watching me walk down the aisle. The exact same light had burned in his eyes back then. Only then, it was meant for me. "Kate," he said quietly, but in the dead silence of the living room, every word rang out as clearly as a nail being driven into a board. "This is Angie, Angelina Collins. She's expecting my child." A silver fork slipped from Helen's hands. It clattered against the marble floor with a sharp, metallic ring. Blushing deeply and not daring to look up, Helen hastily bent down to retrieve it. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was just descending the stairs from the second floor. At the landing, she froze abruptly. Her hand gripped the mahogany railing, and the festive smile she hadn't managed to wipe away froze on her lips. Silence reigned in the room for about 5 seconds. On the TV screen, a holiday special was playing loudly, the hosts cheerfully wishing viewers familial warmth and happiness. My fingers finished the final crimp. I carefully placed the ravioli on the flour-dusted cutting board. My movements were so calm that I even surprised myself. Then I wiped my hands on my apron, lifted my head, and looked at the girl by the door. She was secretly studying me too. When our eyes met, she recoiled like a frightened rabbit and hid even deeper behind Alex's broad back. "How far along?" I asked. Alex looked caught off guard. He clearly hadn't expected that to be my first question. 4 months. The morning sickness is pretty bad," he mumbled. I turned to Angie. "The first 3 months are the hardest. It'll get easier after that." Angie's eyes widened, her lips trembled, but she didn't make a sound. She darted frightened glances between Alex and me, trying to figure out if I was mocking her, or if I was going to lunge at her and grab her by the hair in the next second. Alex answered for her. "She's doing a bit better, but the smell of food makes her nauseous." "That's normal," I said. When I was carrying Leo, I couldn't even keep water down for the first 5 months. I took off my apron, hung it on the kitchen doorknob, and walked into the foyer. Helen was already bringing out guest slippers. "Angie, right? Don't stand in the doorway. It's freezing outside. Come on in." Eleanor stared at me from the staircase as if I had lost my mind. She was wearing a dark red cashmere cardigan, her hair perfectly styled in fresh waves. She had been preparing to preside majestically at the head of the table while her son and daughter-in-law toasted to her health. Now, she looked like she had swallowed a live frog. "Kate, are you Eleanor?" I cut her off with the casual tone one uses to discuss the weather. Alex brought a guest. "We can't leave someone standing in the cold on Christmas Eve, especially in her condition." I bent down, placed the slippers in front of Angie, then straightened up and turned to Helen. "Helen, please set another place at the table. Angie will sit next to me. If kitchen smells bother her, it's best she stays further from the stove." Alex watched the scene unfold in silence. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously, and a storm of emotions I couldn't quite decipher raged in his eyes. He had undoubtedly braced himself for a hurricane for my tears, screaming, hysterics, perhaps for me to dump a bowl of ground meat over his head. But he certainly hadn't expected me to hand slippers to his pregnant mistress. Kate, He called my name again, his voice even softer and more uncertain. Yes? I turned to him. Thank you. For what? I offered a slight smile. The holidays are a time for family warmth. Take Angie to the sofa. Dinner will be ready soon. I turned on my heel and went back into the kitchen. The hot steam from the pot enveloped my face. One by one, I dropped the ravioli into the boiling water. The white squares dove into the bubbling froth and floated back up. I counted in my head, 1, 2, 3, exactly 18 crimps on each one. My hands weren't shaking. Deep down, the blade I had been sharpening for the past 3 years was now sharper than ever. My name is Catherine. I have been married to Alexander Wentworth for 6 years. Our son, Leo, is 3 years old. 6 years ago, our wedding was the talk of Boston. The Wentworths were one of the most powerful real estate dynasties in Massachusetts. Their company, Wentworth Development, led by Alex's father, Peter Wentworth Sr., was among the top 10 developers in New England. My family wasn't poor, but compared to the Wentworths, we were solidly middle class. My parents gave me a great education. I graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, and got a job as an architect at a boutique firm. Alex and I met during a pitch for one of their new luxury condo projects. That day, Peter Sr. tore our concept to shreds. I stood by the projector, gripping my laser pointer so tightly my knuckles turned white. After the meeting, Alex caught up with me by the elevators. Kate, don't take my dad's words to heart. He's always like that. Your project is excellent, really. He courted me for 6 months after that. It wasn't the aggressive pursuit of a wealthy heir. Rather, it was full of awkward, sincere, and simple gestures. He'd bring me an umbrella on rainy days or have lunch delivered to my office. When I worked late, he'd invite me to art galleries on the weekends. And when we got tired of walking, we'd buy hot apple cider donuts and eat them sitting on a park bench by the road. He told me he didn't want to rely on the family empire, that he dreamed of opening his own independent design studio. Just you and me, the two of us. His sincerity won me over, and at 24, I married him. For the first 3 years, he truly made me believe in a fairy tale. He didn't touch his father's money. He put together a small team and started an interior design firm. I helped him find clients, drafted blueprints, and negotiated with suppliers. Slowly, our humble studio built a stellar reputation. The year Leo was born, Alex stood outside the delivery room, and when they brought his son out, he sobbed louder than the baby. Relatives of other patients stared in surprise, and a nurse, assuming he was faint from the sight of blood, rushed over with a chair. He tearfully mumbled, "My wife went through so much pain, completely melting my mother-in-law's heart, who immediately slipped a thick envelope of cash into his pocket. Back then, he loved our family with a pure, devoted heart. I felt it. So, when did it all change?" Probably 6 months after our son was born, when Peter Sr. suffered a sudden stroke and passed away. In an instant, the crushing weight of running Wentworth Development fell onto Alex's shoulders. He had to close our studio and move into the corporate headquarters. From that day on, he wore his father's custom suits, sat in his father's leather chair, and tried desperately to project ruthless authority as the CEO in front of his father's old, hardened executives. Every morning when I saw him off, I noticed his clenched jaw. He hadn't wanted this burden, but he had no choice. He became busier, coming home later and later. The smell of cigarette smoke clung to him more heavily. Our conversations shifted from, "How was your day?" to, "How much did Leo eat?" and eventually dwindled to nothing. At night, we lay in the same bed, him on his edge, me on mine, and the blanket between us felt like an uncrossable abyss. I tried to fix things. I packed him lunches, asked him out to the movies, and brought late-night dinners with Leo right to his office when he worked overtime. Every time, he would give a rehearsed smile and say, "Thanks, but you're tired. Go home and get some rest." That smile was polite. Too polite. Like one you'd give to an acquaintance. At what point did the man who sobbed outside the maternity ward turn into a cold stranger whose thank you felt like a dismissal? I didn't know the exact date, but I knew for a fact that at that point of no return, another name had been entered into the equation. Because today wasn't the first time I had heard the name Angelina Collins. Last November, he went on a business trip to Providence. When he returned, I noticed a tiny detail. He had changed the passcode on his phone. It used to be Leo's birthday. Sometimes I'd grab his phone to snap a picture of our son and unlock it out of habit. That day, I wanted to take a photo of a Lego castle Leo had built. I typed in his birthday incorrect. I tried twice more, and the phone locked me out. I quietly set it back on the counter and didn't ask a single question, but from that day forward, I started watching closely. He acted normal. He still kissed my forehead before leaving. He still occasionally brought home flowers. But his eyes had changed. You can always tell if someone loves you by looking in their eyes. When he looked at me, his gaze no longer lingered. It slid right past me. It's how people look at old furniture in their house. They know it's there, but they don't really see it. 2 weeks later, he took Leo to the mall. When they came back, Leo was clutching a wooden building set I hadn't seen before. The craftsmanship was exquisite, hand-carved, smooth edges. Definitely not mass-produced. I asked my son where he got the toy. Leo chirped, "Daddy's friend gave it to me. A pretty lady." Alex immediately cut in. It was a promotional giveaway at the mall's holiday event, and quickly changed the subject. I didn't press him. I didn't have hard proof yet. A week after that, he was taking a phone call on the balcony, his voice hushed. Cartoons were blasting in the living room. I stood by the glass door with 2 glasses of water and caught the tail end of his sentence. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it entirely. Your only job right now is to take care of yourself." He hung up, turned around, and saw me. For a split second, panic flashed across his face, but he smoothly took the glass and sighed. "Corporate issues." I nodded silently, handed him the water, and walked back to the couch. Corporate issues. How many men have used that excuse to cover their tracks? He probably thought I was clueless, but I didn't show my hand. It wasn't time yet. 2 months later, while decluttering the house, I decided to donate old appliances and children's books to a local youth shelter supported by the Wentworth Foundation. The shelter's director, Mrs. Davis, a woman in her 50s, gave me a brief tour. Kids were playing in the yard. Suddenly, Mrs. Davis pointed to a corner where a young woman in a blue dress was standing. "Catherine, look over there. That's Angie, a college volunteer your husband sponsors. She comes every week, and the kids just adore her." I looked. The girl appeared to be in her early 20s. Tall, slender, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She was crouching down, teaching a little girl how to draw. When she smiled, her eyes crinkled into little crescents, and her face looked as pure as spring water. "Angelina Collins," the director continued. "She's a junior at a college down in Providence. She comes from a very poor background, so Miss Wentworth's charity fund covers her tuition stipend. She volunteered to stay and help out over the winter break, and we were thrilled to have her." "That's wonderful," I replied. "What a sweet girl." That evening, Alex came home surprisingly early for dinner. Sitting across from me, he ate his soup and asked Leo about preschool. I watched him, thinking of the girl in the shelter's courtyard and her innocent smile, and felt something inside me finally and completely freeze over. The college in Providence and his frequent trips to Rhode Island fit the puzzle perfectly. But I didn't dig deeper. Not because I didn't want to, but because the time still hadn't come. And now, today had arrived. Christmas Eve. The day he brought her into our home. I stood in the kitchen. The ravioli floated to the top, plump and white. Using a slotted spoon, I carefully scooped them out and arranged them on a fine porcelain platter in perfect rows. Exactly 18 crimps on each, not one less. From the living room, I heard Eleanor's voice, choked with fury. "Alexander, with me, now." Heavy footsteps marched up the stairs. Leo ran out of his playroom holding a fresh drawing and happily dashed over to Angie. "Lady, look! I drew a dinosaur." Angie knelt down and said softly, "Wow, that's beautiful. You're a real artist." Her voice was gentle. She really did act like a kindergarten teacher. I carried the platter of ravioli to the table, joining 6 cold appetizers, 4 hot entrees, and a rich pheasant consommé. The Wentworth family holiday dinners always adhered to strict standards. Helen had been cooking since dawn. The dark oak dining table, purchased by the late Peter Sr. at an auction, was surrounded by 12 heavy chairs. It was meant for a massive family. But after my father-in-law died, there were very few of us left. Alex, Eleanor, me, our son, and Helen. 5 people for 12 chairs. Empty and lonely. Today Angie had joined us. Counting the baby in her belly, we were almost 7. When Eleanor came back downstairs, her face was pale with rage. She marched to the table and shot Angie a look that could turn a person to ice. With a sharp jerk, she pulled out her chair and snapped her linen napkin open over her lap. It sounded like the crack of a whip. "Alex, that project you mentioned," she began in a cold, clipped tone. "As soon as dinner is over, step into my office." "Mom, it's Christmas Eve. Let's discuss business after the holidays," Alex muttered, a hint of irritation in his voice. "After the holidays?" Eleanor slammed her silver fork down. "The day you brought her into this house, you should have known an explanation would be required immediately." Angie shrank into her chair, her head bowed, fingers twisting frantically in her lap. She had taken off her puffer coat. Underneath, she wore a loose knit dress that clearly showed her rounded belly. Her neck was thin, her collarbones prominent. She looked even younger than I had guessed, 21, maybe younger. "Eleanor," I stood up, holding a crystal flute of champagne. "It's a holiday. Let's not make our guest uncomfortable. All serious talk can wait until tomorrow. I'd like to raise a glass to you. May the new year bring you excellent health and prosperity." Eleanor stared at me. Her eyes were a mix of fury, resentment, and deep disappointment at my behavior. She must have been wondering why the legal wife wasn't scratching this homewrecker's eyes out and was instead playing peacemaker. Nevertheless, she didn't refuse the glass. We clinked, and she drained it. Then, she set the glass down with a heavy thud, leaned back, and stayed silent. I sat down, picked up my serving utensils, and placed a glazed short rib on Angie's plate. "Try this. It's Helen's specialty." Leo usually eats half a platter himself. Angie looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you, Kate." Her voice was a mere whisper. "You're welcome," I replied, placing a piece of baked sea bass next to the beef. "Fish is packed with protein. Good for the baby. Eat up." Then I reached for the jumbo shrimp, picked the largest one, and set it on my mother-in-law's plate. "Eleanor, please have some. Helen picked these up fresh at the market this morning." Eleanor let out a loud, exasperated sigh. There were so many conflicting emotions in that sound. She had definitely concluded that her daughter-in-law was either a saint or entirely delusional. The atmosphere at the table was suffocatingly tense. Alex sat between me and Angie, staring at his plate, too afraid to utter a word. Eleanor lazily poked at her fish, mashing it into paste. Angie nibbled carefully on a rib, terrified of making a sound. Leo was the only one actually enjoying Christmas Eve. He sat next to me, kicking his little legs, bombarding Angie with questions. "Lady, do you have a baby in your tummy? Do you like dinosaurs? Do you know the song about the brave knight?" Angie finally managed a small smile at his interrogation. The curve of her lips in that moment looked strangely familiar to my own. As I lowered my head to sip my soup, I glanced at my phone screen resting on the table. 2 text notifications lit up. One was from my best friend, Olivia. "Merry Christmas, babe. I dug up everything on that charity fund you asked about." The second was from my father. "Katie, Arthur Vance finalized the asset inventory list just like you asked. I'll hand it over right after the holidays." I swiped both notifications away and placed the phone face down. By the end of dinner, there were 6 ravioli left on the platter. Eleanor had taken one, bitten into it, but clearly having lost her appetite, put it back. Alex hadn't touched a single one all night. Angie ate one, complimented the taste, and then, looking overwhelmed by the mountain of food I had piled onto her plate, timidly set her fork down. "Kate," she whispered softly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "For what?" I elegantly folded my napkin. "A pregnant girl has nowhere to go on Christmas Eve. Alex did the right thing bringing you here. You're part of our family now." As I said it, I threw a fleeting glance at my mother-in-law. Calling her pale wouldn't do it justice. Her face looked like a cast-iron skillet that had been struck repeatedly with a sledgehammer. Suddenly, Angie burst into tears. Fat drops fell onto her plate. She frantically wiped at her face, smearing her sleeves with tears and gravy. Kate, I don't know how to look you in the eye. Please, forgive me. You have nothing to apologize for, I interrupted, handing her a tissue. A pregnancy is never just one person's doing. Take care of yourself. The baby is what matters most right now. Alex watched the exchange in silence. His eyes held a whole spectrum of emotions. Shock, gratitude, guilt, and a faint trace of anxiety. He must have truly believed I had accepted this. Angie probably thought this Christmas Eve would go down as the strangest, yet most peaceful night in Wentworth family history. They were both dead wrong. Bidva, 0 a.m. The Wentworth estate was entirely silent. Eleanor had taken 2 sleeping pills before bed. Helen had retired to her quarters hours ago. Alex decided to sleep in his study, claiming he needed to discuss future logistics with Angie. I set Angie up in the first-floor guest bedroom myself. I laid out fresh linens, fluffed her pillows, and brought her an extra heated blanket. Pregnant women often run cold, and the heating in that wing was spotty. Leo had been asleep in his bed for a while, clutching a stuffed plush dinosaur. A tiny smile lingered on his lips. He was happy because a nice lady had come over to play and draw with him. He had no idea that this lady's presence was about to obliterate his familiar world, and he didn't know what his life would look like when he woke up tomorrow. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time. Moonlight sliced through the gap in the curtains, casting a glow on his chubby cheeks. He had long lashes, just like mine, and the same straight nose. He rolled onto his side and mumbled in his sleep, "Mommy, dinosaur is hungry." I pulled his blanket up and kissed his forehead gently. He smiled and hugged the toy tighter. I stood up, went back to the master bedroom, and opened my closet. From the very back, I pulled out a pre-packed overnight bag. Its contents were simple: my and my son's passports, bank cards, a few changes of clothes, and a USB flash drive. That flash drive contained copies of every Wentworth development vendor contract from the last 3 years, an original scan of Peter Wentworth Sr.'s last will and testament, a detailed ledger of all of Alex's assets and debts, and screenshots of every single text message between Alex and Angie. It had took me 3 years to compile those files. The time had come. I carried the bag to the foyer, put on my black wool coat, wrapped my scarf around my neck, and paused for a second outside the nursery door. Leo was sleeping soundly, completely unaware. Honestly, it broke my heart to take him away from his father. But I refused to let him grow up in a home where his mother was being betrayed. Sooner or later, he would understand. I just hoped that when that day came, he would forgive me. I stepped out into the driveway. The Christmas lights wrapped around the oak trees were still glowing, swaying slightly in the bitter winter wind. Their reflection hit the snow like dying embers. In the distance, sporadic fireworks still popped, painting silver streaks across the midnight blue sky before vanishing. The air was frigid, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache, but my soul felt incredibly warm. After 6 years, I was finally walking out of those wrought iron gates. I never had to play the dutiful wife again. Rolling my suitcase down the snow-dusted driveway, I walked through the gates. Parked just around the corner was a black SUV, a thin layer of frost already forming on its roof. The driver's side window rolled down. It was my father's tired face. He wore his old winter jacket, collar popped up against the wind. An unlit cigarette hung from his lips. He didn't ask any questions. "What about Leo?" he asked softly. "I'll have you pick him up tomorrow morning. Let him sleep peacefully through the night." I opened the passenger door and climbed in. The heater was blasting. The seats were covered in knitted wool covers my late mother had made. My dad started the engine, and the car glided smoothly down the empty, snow-covered Boston streets. "Are the papers ready?" he asked. Arthur Vance filed the divorce and asset division petition right before the holidays. The court notified us that the docket will be officially registered on the first business day after Christmas. The motion to freeze his corporate shares will be filed simultaneously. As of today, he won't be able to move a single cent. And what about this Angie girl? Olivia found out everything. Where the stipend money came from, her real age, and who the baby actually belongs to. The proof is all on my flash drive. My dad stayed silent, keeping his eyes on the road. From the car speakers, an old Tom Petty song played softly. Dad used to love it when he was younger. Every time he took me fishing, he'd hum it under his breath. Mom always used to say he couldn't hold a tune to save his life, but she never corrected him. She just smiled warmly as she watched him grill fish over the campfire. The festive lights of Boston blurred past the window. Row after row of holiday decorations faded into the rearview mirror. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Saying goodbye to the city I had lived in for the last 6 years, I thought I would cry. I thought the pain would be unbearable, that my mind would replay all the sweet nothings Alex had once whispered to me, blending them in a cruel montage with the sight of that young woman in our foyer. But none of that happened. My heart beat with a steady, peaceful rhythm, as if waking up from a long, deep sleep. I had been planning this move for 3 whole years. Once he actually walked her through our front door, I had 0 doubts left. There was nowhere to go but forward. As we drove over the Zakim Bridge, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Alex. He was probably still sitting in his study, racking his brain over how to juggle a legal wife and a pregnant college student, how to force me into accepting this new reality, and how to play peacekeeper between his mother and his mistress. He probably thought everything went phenomenally well tonight. At the very least, dinner ended without a screaming match. I opened the text. Kate, thank you so much for your understanding tonight. I know how much this hurts you, but Angie really has no one else. She's completely alone with this baby. I can't abandon her. Please believe me, you and Leo will always be the most important people in my life. Give me a little time and I'll sort everything out. Merry Christmas. I love you. I love you. On Christmas Eve, he brings a girl knocked up with his child into our home, makes me serve her food and make her bed, and at 2:00 a.m., he sends me this garbage. I stared at the screen and let out a soft chuckle. There was no irony or sadness in it, just pure astonishment at how masterfully a person could cosplay as a noble hero, genuinely believing he was acting like a responsible, empathetic man. I typed out a reply, deleted it. Then I wrote just 2 words, Merry Christmas. I turned off my phone and tossed it into my purse. The car pulled up to a 3-story timber cabin on the shores of a lake in the Berkshires. It was my parents' old house, where they had lived for 30 years. 2 massive oak trees, planted by my dad the year I was born, stood in the yard. Their branches stretched into the night sky, framing a thin crescent moon. A porch light glowed warmly, and sitting on the steps was our old orange tabby cat, Buster. Seeing the headlights, he stretched lazily, tail held high. I stepped out of the car. The night air smelled of pine needles, lake mist, and wood smoke from the chimney. That distinct, comforting scent of home instantly warmed my soul. This was what real home felt like. Once inside, I pulled my laptop out of my bag, sat at the rustic dining table, plugged in the flash drive, and opened a folder labeled A.C. I hadn't had time to thoroughly review the investigation results Olivia had sent me the day before. The documents loaded one by one. Angelina Collins' real name was Angelina Cole, and she wasn't 21, she was 24. After high school, she hadn't gotten into a legitimate 4-year university and had spent 3 years enrolled at a sketchy community college in Providence. During her sophomore year, she lost her financial aid after being caught forging documents to claim someone else's housing subsidy. After dropping out, she got a job as a waitress at a shady karaoke lounge. Thanks to her innocent looks, she started dating a sketchy local guy. They lived together for 6 months, and she got pregnant. When he dumped her, she went to a private clinic to get an abortion. There, she met the owner of the establishment and ended up working the front desk as a receptionist. Though her social media profiles were locked down, Olivia had tracked down a former coworker and acquired old screenshots that painted a very different picture. Last October, Angelina had posted on her feed, "Goal for this year, bag a rich guy. I'm done carrying broke losers. Upwards and onwards." Attached was a mirror selfie taken in a hotel room. In the reflection, a man's suit jacket was draped over the bed. The cufflinks on the sleeves were custom-made platinum family heirlooms engraved with Alex's initials, inherited from his father. The charity scholarship story was a carefully orchestrated scam. Out of hundreds of applicants to the foundation, she somehow managed to secure approval personally signed off by Alex. Furthermore, she registered her pregnancy at a clinic the exact same month she received her first grant. Her prenatal visit dates and her sob story about finding out she was pregnant only after her boyfriend left her crumbled to dust against the bank statements Olivia had unearthed. Exactly 1 day before she registered her pregnancy, a wire transfer of $25,000 hit Angelina's personal checking account, sent by an LLC registered as a consulting firm. The registered CEO of that firm was the cousin of Angelina's old college roommate. Over the past 2 years, this shell company had received 6 payments from Wentworth Development for alleged marketing services, each ranging from $15,000 to $25,000. As for whether the baby was actually Alex's, that question answered itself after reviewing the youth shelter's security footage and her doctor's appointment logs. The gestation timeline proved that during the month of conception, she had seen Alex exactly twice, whereas she had been hooking up with her ex from the karaoke lounge at least 3 times a week. It took me 20 minutes to read through the files. With every page, my blood ran colder. I closed that folder and opened the next one, Wentworth Dev, Assets and Legal Liability. This archive was much larger. My lawyer, Arthur Vance, and I had been painstakingly assembling it for 3 years. On paper, Alex had full executive control of the company. However, Peter Wentworth Sr.'s last will contained a hidden stipulation. The company's core assets were locked in a closed, irrevocable family trust, and the primary beneficiary of that trust was Alex's legitimate, firstborn son, Arleo. In the event that Alex's marriage ended in divorce due to proven fault on his part, control of the trust automatically transferred to a proxy designated by the secondary beneficiary, me. And that proxy, according to my late father-in-law's ironclad legal directive, was his longtime trusted financial advisor who just happened to be Arthur Vance's senior partner. In other words, Peter Sr. had planted a legal landmine before he died, one Alex was completely oblivious to. His father knew him too well. He didn't trust Alex to keep the business afloat or keep his family together. The final line of defense his father left for our family was me. I sorted the files by date, structured the evidentiary exhibits, and emailed the zipped archive to Arthur Vance. In the body of the email, I wrote just one sentence. Execute the plan on the first business day after the holiday. Then, I turned my phone back on and sent a text to Alex. Alex, please take Angie to her prenatal checkup tomorrow morning. I booked her a VIP appointment with Dr. Evans at Boston Memorial at 9:00 a.m. She's pretty far along, so she needs a comprehensive screening. The reply came instantly. I will. Thank you, Kate. You're incredibly gracious. I didn't reply. He would get to experience the full extent of my grace very soon. At dawn, I lay in my childhood bed, staring out the window at the snow-covered oaks. A bird perched on a branch. In the dim morning light, I couldn't tell what kind it was. It ruffled its feathers and flew away. My phone rang. The screen flashed Eleanor's name. I answered and put it on speaker. Catherine, where are you? Her voice was shrill and frantic. In the background, I could hear the panicked footsteps of the staff and Alex shouting from down the hall. Did you check the closet? Helen must have gone in to clean the master bedroom and noticed that half the wardrobe was empty. My suitcase was gone, and all my personal documents had vanished. I'm speaking to you. Where did you go? Do you have any idea Alex has been tearing the house apart looking for you all morning? Eleanor? I sat up, leaning back against the wooden headboard. I left. Left? What do you mean left? When are you coming back? I'm not. There was a loud crash on the other end, like something shattering against the floor. Then Alex's voice came through. He must have snatched the phone from his mother. His voice was a chaotic mix of panic, anger, and absolute terror. Kate, where are you? Why did you leave? Explain this to me. Everything was fine last night. You literally said you understood Angie's situation. You took care of her at dinner. Didn't you, Alex? I cut him off, and for the first time, a light laugh escaped my lips, the laugh I had been holding back for so long. Are you really judging my acceptance of the situation by the fact that I served food? Did you notice I didn't touch a single bite on my own plate the entire night? Dead silence fell over the line. You thought because I made a bed for your mistress, I accepted her? You're wrong. I was making the bed as a shroud for your reputation. I didn't wait this long because I forgave you. I waited for you to put all your cards on the table yourself, and you did exactly that. You brought a pregnant woman into our home, right in front of your mother, our housekeeper, and our son. You left a trail straight to the charity foundation. You practically gift-wrapped the evidence against yourself. What? What evidence are you talking about? I booked your little college student's ultrasound. The timeline of her pregnancy, the dates of your business trips, hotel receipts, the grant approval documents with your signature, and the wire transfers to that shell, Consulting LLC. I have it all. You thought you were planning a happy future, but all you were doing was helping me build an airtight case for court. His breathing over the phone grew heavy and ragged. The court will register the docket on Monday morning. The injunction to freeze your corporate shares has already been filed. As of today, your accounts are locked. Whatever slush fund you set aside to play house with Angie is frozen by the bank. Kate, wait. And one more thing, Alex. Tell your little companion that when the baby is born, she absolutely needs to get a paternity test. I hung up. I leaned back in the old wicker chair, stroking Buster the cat, who had curled up comfortably in my lap and was purring like a motor. The shadows of the bare branches lengthened as the morning sun broke through the curtains in golden streaks. My phone vibrated furiously on the nightstand. Alex was calling nonstop. I simply flipped the silence switch. Instead, a text popped up from Olivia. Girl, your front page news. Someone got a picture of you walking out of the Wentworth estate with a suitcase at 3 a.m. Twitter is losing its mind over the Christmas Eve elite drama. The comments are exploding. I replied shortly. I'm at the lake. Later, Helen told Olivia exactly what went down in the living room after I hung up. Alex violently hurled his phone at the floor, shattering the screen into a spider web. Then he collapsed onto the couch, grabbing his hair, shaking uncontrollably. He kept screaming hysterically at the broken phone on the floor. She was tracking me. What else does she have? How did she get the vendor contracts? Eleanor sat frozen on a chair, pale as a ghost. Angie was standing on the staircase, gripping the railing with one hand and covering her mouth with the other. Her makeup was running down her face in dirty streaks. In that exact moment, it seemed she finally realized her wealthy golden goose had turned into a sinking ship overnight. On the second day of the new year, the court officially accepted the filing. The notice of the asset freeze on Wentworth Development shares was delivered straight to Alex's corporate office. In a blind rage, he tore the document to shreds right in front of the process server. The server calmly informed him that destroying court documents was a federal offense, resulting in Alex being dragged down to a magistrate judge to sign a behavior mandate. The following week, when Angie showed up at Boston Memorial for her VIP appointment, she was intercepted by federal investigators. She was brought in for questioning regarding suspected welfare fraud, forging documents to receive federal subsidies, and conspiracy to embezzle corporate funds via a shell LLC. That $25,000 wire transfer had become Exhibit A in an open corporate fraud investigation. During her detainment at the clinic, Angie had a hysterical meltdown. She sank to the floor in the hallway, clutching her belly, screaming, "Don't touch me! I'm pregnant!" Dr. Evans stood nearby. Above his surgical mask, his eyes were entirely devoid of sympathy. He merely looked down and said flatly, "Miss, judging by your blood work, I think we should probably prioritize a syphilis test immediately." 2 weeks later, the first hearing for the divorce proceedings took place. Alex had hired the most expensive, aggressive divorce litigator in Boston, a man famous for turning facts inside out. He strutted into the courtroom in a bespoke suit, radiating absolute confidence, and began his opening statement. Your Honor, the plaintiff, Catherine Wentworth, has long suffered from severe postpartum depression and exhibits highly erratic emotional instability. We have compelling evidence that her recent actions are driven purely by paranoid delusion and personal vindictiveness. Then my lawyer, Arthur Vance, stood up. Without a word, he began sliding thick binders across the defendant's table. 3 years of text transcripts between Alex and Angelina. Bank wire traces. Geolocation matching of their hotel stays. Medical records. And finally, the original, notarized copy of Peter Wentworth Sr.'s irrevocable trust stipulations. Alex's high-priced lawyer watched his case evaporate. His smug expression morphed into sheer bewilderment, and then all color drained from his face. He slowly turned to his client with a silent, furious look that screamed, "Why the hell didn't you tell me about any of this?" Alex sat at the defendant's table, his lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. All the color had drained from his face, and he couldn't utter a single word. The judge called a recess. When we walked out of the courthouse, the crisp winter sun was blinding. I stood on the granite steps and saw my dad's SUV parked by the curb. Dad was. She hadn't eaten it, refusing to let it out of her sight the entire car ride to the courthouse. Standing next to it, and from the backseat window, a tiny hand was waving frantically. It was Leo. My dad had brought him. I rushed down the steps and threw the door open. My son immediately threw his arms around my neck. He was wearing his red winter coat, his cheeks flushed from the cold air, his eyes shining brightly. He squeezed me tight and proudly announced, "Mommy, Grandpa said that now you, me, and Maya are going to live at the lake house." Maya, I froze in surprise. From behind his seat, a little girl peeked out shyly. It was the little girl from the shelter. She wasn't wearing that oversized, faded blue dress anymore. She was wearing a brand new pink hoodie that I had asked Olivia to drop off for her. Her hair was braided neatly into two pigtails, her face was scrubbed clean, and in her hands, she carefully held a plastic clamshell container with a piece of strawberry cake. It was the cake that Noah, the older teen from the shelter who always looked out for her, had bought her the day before. She hadn't eaten it, refusing to let it out of her sight the entire car ride to the courthouse. She looked me in the eyes, bit her lip, and finally, no longer calling me lady, whispered softly, "Mommy, I saved you half my strawberry cake." I gently lifted her out of the back seat, wrapping one arm around her and the other around Leo. We sat right there on the courthouse steps. I buried my face in their warm little shoulders. The sunlight poured over us, as comforting and heavy as a down comforter. My dad put out his cigarette, pretended to tie his shoe, and discreetly wiped his glasses 3 times. A month later, on the shores of the lake in the Berkshires, I opened an independent architectural design firm. I named it Aura Design, a fresh start for me and my newly blended family. The firm was small, only 12 employees, but almost all of them were the original designers from Alex and my old studio. When they heard I was divorcing him and starting my own practice, they quit Wentworth Development with zero hesitation and jumped ship to me. Alex's corporate floor emptied out overnight. On her last day, his executive assistant walked around the entire building handing out Godiva chocolates, loudly declaring it was a celebration of her emancipation from slavery. After Alex's shares were frozen, control of Wentworth Development reverted to the trustee appointed by the family fund. By a unanimous vote of the board of directors, Alex was officially ousted as CEO. On the day he was escorted from the building, paparazzi caught photos of him standing on the sidewalk outside the glass tower, holding a cardboard banker's box, waiting for an Uber. He looked disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his face hollowed out. The photos plastered the Boston business journals under the headline, "Former real estate heir left with nothing. The collapse of an elite marriage." The top-voted comment under the article read, "Brings his mistress home on Christmas Eve just so his wife can walk out with the entire company on Christmas Day." How did a guy this stupid run a billion-dollar corporation in the first place? Angie's criminal trial concluded 2 months later. For the wire fraud and embezzlement charges, she was sentenced to 1 year in prison, suspended for 2 years of strict probation. The $25,000 was seized by the federal government. During her sentencing, she sobbed uncontrollably. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she cradled her stomach and wailed, "My baby is innocent." From the gallery, a guy she used to work with at the karaoke bar yelled out, "Do you even know who the daddy is?" The bailiffs immediately threw him out. She never contacted Alex again. According to Mrs. Davis from the shelter, she was seen at South Station a few days later, heavily pregnant, waiting for an Amtrak train heading down south. 3 months after suffering a minor stress-induced heart attack, Eleanor called me. Her speech was slightly slurred, the words difficult to form, but I could make out what she was saying. "Catherine, come back, I was wrong." I held the phone to my ear for a long time, then replied softly, "Take care of your health, Eleanor. Leo will come visit you sometime." After I hung up, I went into my contacts and changed her name from mother-in-law to Eleanor Wentworth. It wasn't out of spite. It's just that some wounds heal, leaving scars. The scar remains, but it doesn't hurt anymore. On a Saturday afternoon, Noah, Maya, Leo, and I went down to the lake to fly a kite. Noah had built it himself out of wooden dowels and newspapers, and Maya had tied 2 bright ribbons to the tail. Noah sprinted across the grass, trying to catch the wind, but the kite kept nosediving. Maya stomped her foot in frustration, then hoisted Leo onto her shoulders so he could hold the kite higher. Eventually, all 3 of them tumbled onto the soft grass, roaring with laughter. No one was hurt. Their joyous giggles echoed far across the water. My dad was sitting on a folding chair by the dock. Buster the cat was curled up asleep next to his tackle box. Dad held a fishing rod, the line swaying gently in the breeze, the bobber perfectly still. But a soft, permanent smile played on his lips, the peaceful smile of a man who never had to worry about his daughter again. I sat down next to him, watching the kids wrestle in the grass as the newspaper kite finally caught an updraft, soaring higher and higher into the crisp blue sky above the lake. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Alex. "Kate, I'm on the other side of the lake. I can see the kite. Can I come over and talk to the kids?" I lifted my head and looked across the water. A man in an old, faded jacket was standing under a weeping willow. He was noticeably thinner, completely hollowed out. He was watching the children play from afar, not daring to step closer. I looked down and typed my reply. "Stay there. I'll come to you." I stood up, brushed the dry grass off my jeans, and started walking toward the bridge. The spring breeze drifted across the water, carrying the chill of the lake and the scent of damp earth. Noah's kite danced high in the sky behind me. The laughter of Maya and Leo spun through the air. The surface of the water rippled, the late afternoon sun painting every wave in liquid gold. Some debts don't need to be paid back with hatred. In some stories, there shouldn't be a victor. He was looking for a reason to keep living. My only role was to protect the joyful smiles of Noah, Maya, and Leo from his shadow. After we spoke, he would turn and leave. And I would turn back to the lake, where our kite was still flying high.